Good morning, all. I hope I am audible. So, I welcome all the PhD scholars of Faculty of Ayurveda, Homeopathy, Nursing, Medicine, and Physiotherapy in today's session of coursework. Today, we have with us Professor Dr. Gundappa S. Rao, sir, as a resource person. Sir will be dealing with the topic of intellectual property rights at the university level. Sir is a renowned researcher, academician, and clinician, and he is in the field of research since last 25 years. I welcome Professor Dr. Gundappa Rao, sir, in today's session. Sir will continue, and there was some technical problem in the last session. So, if anybody has any query, we will deal it with in today's session. So, over to you, Gundappa Rao, sir.
So, Dr. Akshar.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah. Shall I share that one? PPT?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, you can share the screen and start the lecture.
Yeah. Is it Dr. Akshar?
Sir, your screen is visible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Shall I start?
Yes, sir. Please, you can start.
Good morning, all. In continuation of the last lecture, so there were some technical issues, I believe. That was the last lecture was a basic as far as intellectual property is concerned. Today I will be dealing little different or applied aspect of intellectual property as far as universities are concerned. Universities and intellectual property. Today's lecture. Universities and institutions. I think I should. Yes. Universities and public research, PRIs, economy. So, knowledge that is churned out from the universities is a part of the economy. So, nowadays, a lot of emphasis is laid on it. So, intellectual property is one element of that knowledge. So, intellectual property adds another for universities to this they generate and to have that knowledge. This knowledge research what we conduct in the educational institutions or public research institutions as an economic angle. See, we will deal with different aspects of intellectual property. Universities and public research institutions, PRIs, seeking to partner with industry or other organizations need a policy for effective intellectual property management. So once the data is generated or the after completion of the research, it has to be shared. It has to come into the public domain. Sometimes it will be an expensive thing. So naturally, industry will come into the picture. So they fund the part or kind of such products. So in that case, policies. It can be from at university institutional level or from the industry also. So it is a sort of a more understanding we can reach out. Then IP provides structure. So IP policy, predictability, and a beneficial environment. So environment will be conducive in which enterprise and researchers can access and share knowledge and IP, right? So what is the role of IPs? What is the role of IP in universities and public research institutions? How it is involved? How we can have an understanding with the persons who are or bodies who are funding us? Intellectual property plays an essential role in both the research and teaching functions of the universities and PRS. Research as well as teaching. So if you are developing some teaching modules or teaching curriculum or methods, you can register it. So that is where intellectual property comes into play. This includes IP created by universities, PRIs, and also third party that they use in the network. So we'll be taking during the course of research or during the framing of modules or syllabus, so many agencies, so many bodies, so many persons they have a share in the intellectual. So they are the third parties and research. Whether it is a basic or applied research, through universities and PRS produce results in the form of inventions, scholarly publications, databases, new plant varieties, confidential information, computer programs, etc. So these are the things that we come across during our work or research or teaching. So what to do and what not to do. To what extent we should expose ourselves or bring that knowledge or research into the public domain. How we should resist and what are the things we should take care during this. Many of these are protected by IP. Confidential information, computer program, etc., are all protectable by IP. Yet they are also no more than proof of concept or laboratory which R&D before they can be commercialized. Okay, it can be a basic thing or it can be advanced research and allowing so IB teaching is concerned, uh, what are the points or what we should take care IB is concerned. In addition, or public research institutions, teaching activities will also generate even the teaching generate IP, such as print publications, thesis, software, films, sound recordings, computer presentations, and multimedia works. As far as this is a teaching, see, while framing the modules or the syllabus or curriculum or anything as far as teaching is concerned, so there are so many things that come into play. So what are the things we should register under intellectual property? We can avoid it. Okay, these are generally protected copyrights. This teaching generally, what print publications, thesis, software, sound recordings, computer presentation, and multimedia. These are registered under copyright. That means protection is given by copyright. So the internet and modern technology have fostered great access to scholarly material, but also prompted greater conflict over the ownership and use. Nowadays, everything is commercialized. So naturally, everyone will have a share in the efforts. What they so universities and PRS need suitable IP policies to deal with the ownership and management of teaching materials, access to information, and use of third-party material. Right. So universities and PRS ultimately they serve the public interest. How disseminating knowledge through both research and teaching. Traditionally, many have done this by building close links with the local industry and business, as well as publishing the results of the research. The era of globalization and the internet has opened up new possibilities. So now, at the click of the button or computer, we have the information. So, to what extent we can publicly, or you can, access publications may be appropriate, while open access publication may be appropriate, confidential, temporarily, so they can be patented and developed commercially. So we should know what do's and don'ts, or to what level we have to disclose the information as far as research and teaching is concerned. To manage their IP and dissemination their knowledge effectively, universities and peers need to understand how to use the IP system. So universities, they can have IP policy. Why do universities peers need an IP policy? University is a big center where teaching and research take place. So identifying and creating IP, identifying and creating an IP, depending on the area where we work, we teach, bringing research result to the next stage of development, from where we can develop it or extend it, have become institutional objectives for many universities and PRIs. In this context, an institutional IP policy is a prerequisite for successful collaboration between academia and commercial partners. So, what are the things that will come into play? An institutional IP policy is a formal document which typically deals with ownership of and ownership and right to use, procedures for identification, evaluation, protection, and management of IP. And also guidance on sharing the profits from the successful exploitation. To ensure respect for the third party. So all the stakeholders in the
Hello.
as far as IP is concerned should be addressed. Policies will have all these points. Provide legal certainty. It provides legal certainty. Nurture an environment that supports innovation and development. Encourages researchers to consider possible opportunities for experimentation. Facilitate the creation of public-private partnership (PPP). Beneficial relationship with other institutions, that is in collaboration. Also, balance the various conflicting research in the society. So there may be sometimes conflicting interest. Ensure compliance with applicable national laws and regulations. So always we have to work within the laws. We have to play within the laws. How is academic knowledge and technology transferred and diffused? So what your research, once you complete your project, naturally how it has to be completed, how it has to be brought into the public, how it has to be made use by the society. Academic knowledge and innovative technologies are transferred and used for scientific, technical, socio-economic, and commercial purposes through a variety of channels. What are the? One is publications through journals, scientific magazines. The other one is presentations and personal content. Just what we do is conferences, course, professional organization, patent, right? Contract research. Okay. Contract research sponsored research institution industry staff exchange, that is faculty are members of student entering the workforce, consultancy work for university staff, and startup. So, by way of spin-off also, spurring the flow of ideas and inventions from PRIs laboratories to marketplace, aims to benefit society through new products, in order to maximize funded research results. Need to ensure that they are disseminated. What it means? Of diffusion and transfer mechanism, publications, licensing, spin-off, startups, and collaboration. All possible commercialization projects, spin-offs, investors, SMEs, other non-profit organizations, innovation support, even then how we can ensure that research development produces the best possible. Please hold on. We have a technical issue. In 1 or 2 minutes, we will solve it. Right. Thank you.
Scholars are requested to please wait. We are working on audio issue. It will be resolved in few minutes.
Yes. So sorry for the interruption. How we can ensure that investment in research and development R&D produces best possible results? While many academics generate impressive research results, their discoveries often require further research and development to fully mature. So naturally, sometimes in initial stages, we will not be in a position to register or bring it to the public domain or do some concrete work. So until the research is a mature one, this can be expensive, time consuming, and risky, and it is clearly not the university PRI's role to manufacture and commercialize the results of its research. In recent decades, numerous academic institutions and commercial partners have been taking steps to bridge the gap between the academia and practice. So, see, everywhere money is involved and finances are required. So many agents are coming and collaborating. Companies and other commercial partners have started adopting open innovation approaches to R&D, combining in-house and external resources. So, from different persons or different agencies or different houses, we can take help. Universities and PRIs have begun to play a more active role in the transfer of their knowledge and their interactions with industry and other partners in order to take full advantage of the results. Then what are the potential benefits of knowledge transfer? So how we have to benefit out of this transfer of knowledge? Knowledge is best disseminated through its publication and release into the public domain. See, here we are concerned with the research at the level of university and also teaching at the level of university or institution. So best disseminated through its publication and release into the public domain. That is the best way. In many cases, the most effective way of realizing the social benefits of research-based knowledge is to protect it under IP laws and sell or transfer it to a company capable of transferring inventions into new products. So what you can do, you can entirely sell or transfer the rights or partially transfer the right, or you can be a part of that. Understanding. When managed strategically, transfer of research results can lead to benefits for society at large, as well as the industry sectors and institutions. What are the benefits? What are the benefits as far as IP is concerned for the society? Transfer of academic research is expected to improve the quality of life generally. We do for the quality of life, for the betterment of the humanity. New products and services meeting human needs in healthcare, environmental challenges and other critical areas. New business and jobs. So this creates a lot of jobs and also startups and spin-offs. Then we'll see what are the benefits for the industry. So collaboration with the universities and PRIs can strengthen the industry by providing companies with IP that they can invest in to develop early stage technologies, providing technical access to local persons and firms, giving companies the opportunity to work with top university researchers, securing companies access to more basic, that is blue sky research fields, enabling them to commercialize new products, generating growth, profit, etc. And also strengthening the local economy. Ultimately, this will be reflected in the economy of that particular country. Right? Then, what are the benefits for the institution? So we have said society and the industry. Now, how the institute will benefit by IP? For universities and PRI, the ultimate benefits of knowledge, technology transfer are usually not financial. So you have to keep this in mind. For PRIs and universities, the ultimate benefits of the knowledge technology transfer are not usually financial. While licensing revenue is occasionally generated, the principal benefits are indirect and should be considered in the longer term. So this is how you have to deal with. They include, among others, what are the others? Attracting key talent. How? If you have the good infrastructure, then you can attract the good talent and good students. Universities that embrace a robust technology transfer environment are more appealing to entrepreneurial faculty, scientists, and students. As I said, funding. Successful technology transfer often attracts additional research funding. So that creates an environment for good research. Prestige. Institutions that succeed in moving discovery from the lab to the marketplace often create a prestigious following. Enhanced quality of research program, interaction with the private sector often results in access to state-of-the-art industrial equipment, improved skills and techniques, and better understanding of market needs. So enhanced teaching. Actually, it can be improved. The teaching can be improved by way of different methods and modules. Faculty career opportunities. Collaboration with industry can facilitate exchange of staff between the institution and businesses and alumni intake in firms. So this will facilitate that. Who are the main stakeholders to be considered when developing an IP policy? So this IP policy when developed by the universities or PRI, and who are the main stakeholders, and to what extent we should consider their involvement. Various stakeholders contribute in one way or the other to the generation and dissemination of the innovation, influential research findings or teaching material. Stakeholders each have their own interests and expectations, which are not always fully aligned. Actually, everybody will have their own thoughts. In order to obtain the commitment and endorsement, an IP policy should preferably be drafted together with the main stakeholders. So, what are the things that we have to consider? Universities and research institutions, employees of these institutions, that is researchers, technicians, administrators, inventors, research groups and departments, graduate and postgraduate students, postgraduate and postdoctoral students and fellows, visiting researchers, sponsors and industry collaborators, national patent office, funding agency, industry. So these are all we have to, they get involved. So they are the stakeholders. What is the typical content of institutional IP policy? An institutional IP policy will usually include rules on several sets of issues. Some of these issues may be dealt with separate policy documents. So it depends on which area and how you want to do it, and whether you want to have a generalized or you want to have a piecemeal intellectual property policy. It all depends on the institution and the field in which we are working. Rules for the management of IP results resulting from research. Ownership of IP and research results. The person or department responsible for the protection and management of IP. Responsibility of the institution's staff and students. Engagement with third parties. Management of conflicts of interest. Incentives to reward researchers for their engagement with innovation and knowledge transfer for social and economic benefit. Rules for dissemination of knowledge and transfer of IP. Publication, dissemination policy, commercialization options and responsibilities, distribution and allocation of benefits, protection of national or public interest. So, all these things we have to consider. Rules regarding collaborative and contract research. Ownership of IP. Who should own the intellectual property? Including background IP held by the participant before a project is started, and potential foreground IP arising through the collaboration. If a person is bringing his IP with him, a researcher, to the institute, naturally that has to be considered and that should be kept in mind. And later on, what is generated after the work, that is foreground IP arising through the collaboration. Responsibility of all parties with respect to IP protection, maintenance, and funding. Conflict of interest, sharing of revenues, collaborative research and contract research agreement. What should researchers and students know about patent and confidentiality? In order to be patentable, an invention must, among other things, be novel. So, in order to be patentable, invention must be a novel. If a researcher or student publicly discloses information about his or invention before filing a patent application, Such disclosure could have the effect of barring the invention from being patented. This is because many countries adopt the so-called universal novelty requirement, which means that information that is published or otherwise made available to the public in any country or the world before the patent application is filed may destroy the novelty of the invention. So, what are the examples? So, the following disclosure of the key features of the invention prior to filing a patent. Disclosure at international exhibition. Disclosure in a journal, book, poster or other publication. Disclosure via website or other electronic means. Disclosure through oral presentation. Disclosure to someone who is not under an obligation to keep the information confidential. So, in these cases, one cannot register. However, many countries allow for a grace period, usually between 6 to 12 months, which provides a safeguard for applicants who have disclosed their invention before filing a patent application. In such countries, if the investor or his successor in title publicly discloses his or her invention but then files a patent application claiming that the invention within the grace period, such public disclosure will not affect the determination of novelty of the claimed invention because it is already in the public domain. So we know who has first made it public. There are different ways of disclosing an invention. The types of disclosure covered by the grace period differ from one country to another because every country has a laws, national law. In some countries, only very limited types of disclosure can be safeguarded. So there is limitations even for the in the safeguard. In general, non-confidential disclosure of an invention before filing of the relevant patent application should be avoided. You see, these are things you have to consider. If disclosing an invention before filing a patent application is unavoidable, for example, if disclosing the invention before filing a patent application is unavoidable, for example, to a potential investor or a business partner, then any disclosure should be accompanied by a confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement. Actually, sometimes you have to have a discussion or a meeting or a understanding. Then at that time, you have to vaguely or outline you can disclose, but under agreement. If an investor wishes to publish his or research result, it is advisable to delay the publication until patent applications are filed. Universities and PRIs should ensure that all stakeholders concerned, whether employees, visiting researchers, outside collaborators, or students, are aware of the confidentiality issues related to the activities along with the opportunity arising from their own and the institution's IP. That is the reason an IP policy should provide clear rules for them regarding disclosure and confidential, as well as model non-disclosure agreements. So they should be made aware. Then what should you know about IP in collaboration projects? IP in collaboration projects. Okay. Universities and PRIs frequently work in collaboration with businesses, governments, or other institutions in order to exploit the risk. Collaboration may take many forms. Such as collaborative research between different universities, PRIs, or between universities, PRIs, and industry, contract research between universities, PRIs, and industry, or free exchange and dissemination of knowledge and material among universities. So it can be anything. So in such circumstances, they need to establish collaboration agreements that safeguard their rights to continue to use existing IP and to exploit the IP that arises from research. Any IP related issue need to be clarified in early stages of discussion with an industry sponsor or commercialization partner. This includes confidentiality issues, ownership of IP, and conflicts of interest. Each party therefore needs to have a good understanding of processes and policies each party, stakeholders, they should have a good understanding of the processes and policies that the institution has in place to manage the collaborative research. So that will be from the institute side. As a good practice, many universities and the PRS make public their standard collaboration agreement template to provide a simple and transparent way. So it can be made into public by way of our website or other things. What are conflicts of commitment and conflicts of interest in relation to academic research at IP? University PRS staff are expected to devote most of their time and intellectual energy to the education, research and other programs supporting the institution mission. That is the main job. A conflict of commitment. Conflict of commitment arises when an individual engages in outside activity, either paid or unpaid. That may adversely affect their commitment to the university PRI. So that university and the institute or the institution and the researcher should have a clear understanding and agreement regarding that. Undertaking outside activities alongside responsibility toward the university PRI can lead to conflicts regarding allocation of time and energy, especially if such activities may result in new IP. See, we are here concerned with the intellectual property. For example, consulting, government service, public service, or pro bono work. A conflict of interest is a situation. Conflict of interest is a situation in which an individual's financial, professional, or other personal consideration may affect his or her professional judgment in exercising any university PRI duty. What are the questionable circumstances that can arise related to research and IP include, for example, if an institution employee personally invests in a business venture created from the institution's IP when they were involved as a researcher or supervisor manager. So, what is the example? Institution employee personally invests in a business venture where that is created from the institutional IP when they were involved as a researcher or supervisor or manager. In some way or the other, they are involved with that work and IP. If a staff member who is a founder of a company personally negotiates the licensing terms with the university or PRI. If a staff member who holds a board position at a company decides on issues involving licensing terms with the university IPR. If a staff member who also consults for another company needs to decide whether to assign his or her invention to the university's PRI or to the company for whom he or she consults. If a staff member accepts research sponsorship from a company in which he or she has a financial interest, the conflict arises because the outcome of the research could materially affect the personal wealth of the research. So, what a conflict of interest commitment policy can either separate from or integrated within the general IP policy. As I said earlier, it can every time, depending on the situation, you can have different policies. It can be integrated or it can be separate from one another. Educates faculty and staff about situations that generate conflicts of interest and conflicts of commitment. Provides disclosure, procedure and means of managing these conflicts and identifies situations that are prohibited. Is there a model IP policy for universities and PRs? No model policy can be applied across all institutions or countries. This is very important. There is no model policy can be applied across all institutions or countries. Since there are important country-specific institutional differences as well as different levels of absorptive capacity. Countries and institutions are still experimenting with a mix of different institutional IP policies and practices, trying to gather evidence on what works and what does not. So, it all again boils down to our requirement. WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, model intellectual property policy for universities and research institutions aims to assist senior university managers in developing their internal IP policy and to provide a checklist of key features that need to be addressed. They give them sort of a guidelines. The many examples of policies in our database can help you understand how other HL policy will be. So, will a good IP policy ensure successful knowledge transfer? Yes. To ensure that knowledge transfer takes place effectively, universities and PRS need to develop and apply a high quality institutional IP policy. It should be of high quality IP policy. Then only that will be everybody will benefit. All the stakeholders will have a say in it. But what is not enough? Successful transfer and diffusion of technology is driven by many other factors, several of which are not directly related to IP. There are so many issues related to the IP. At the national level, an efficient and balanced IP system is necessary. Clear rules for the ownership of IP rights developed within public universities are funded within public resources. Financial support at various levels, research funding, programs to fund the establishment of technology management offices, seed funding, tax incentive to pursue R&Ds in priority areas, such as fostering a particular manufacturing sector or export industry. So these are the things that government supports. Skilled human resources, policies encouraging institutional entrepreneurship, supporting mechanism fostering relationship between local businesses and technology creators, such as science parks and incubators. Incentives provided by government to improve access to technology in sectors such as health, education and public infrastructure. A supportive regulatory environment. So even the regulatory body should be in place. At the institutional level, what I said in the previous part of national level. Autonomy of the institution. So if the institutions have autonomy, they will work more freely. Active involvement of top management. So all the concerned persons should support, encourage. Qualitative research should come out. Awareness and skills of the staff and students regarding IP. Knowledge transfer and entrepreneurship. So those who are involved, they should have the knowledge about IP. Responsibility for the administration of the IP. Establishment of a TMO with adequate human and financial resources. Proximity of the TMO to researchers and faculty. Intellectual labor and creativity. So we should have that also. Incentives for inventors and creators. Team effort on the part of creator of the IP, the staff of it, and others involved. Willingness of the creator to assist in protecting and marketing IP. So every time the creator should help in making the policy or dissemination or in IP. Commitment to social responsibility. Voluntary licensing, education and training. Access to patent information and software with analytical capabilities. So what it at the market level? Sufficient firms that are able to invest the money, time and effort to turn the IP into marketable products. A market that is ready to buy the product once it has been fully developed and is ready for sale. Absorption capacity to assimilate the new knowledge and apply it to commercial end. So now the ownership issues. So who will be the owner, or who are the other persons involved? How can I know who owns what? University and public research institution employees, students, visiting researchers and outside collaborators all create IP in the performance of the research or teaching duties. So they generate or they be part of the program or research, and they have given the intellectual knowledge. This IP may take the form of confidential technical information protected by trade secrets. So sometimes these can be protected by trade secrets, patentable inventions, designs can be protected under design, software program, original written works, under copyright, diagrams, lectures, and presentations, and it can be the output of many other types of creative endeavors. Who owns the rights to these works and results? What will be the ultimate result? The answer is not always easy to clear. It's not always easy to clear, and it's not always have a good understanding. It may vary from one country to another, from one institution to another, and within a given institution, depending on it depends on the type of creator, inventor, like employee, student, visiting professor, researcher, outside collaborator, the nature of the work, like invention, copyright, confidential technical data, design. So these are the things. The creators, inventors, use of resources or funds of institution and or sponsor. Circumstances of creation, whether work is created by individual or as part of a collaborative effort. The circumstances of creation, whether, sorry, it is a repetition. In order to determine the ownership of a particular research outcomes and teaching material, one needs to look at the applicable national IP law. National IP law, the IP policies of the universities and PRIs, the individual contractual agreements among universities, PRIs, creators, and sponsors. So, what national laws might affect ownership of IP created at university PRIs? In the first instance, the issue of ownership is defined in the applicable national IP law. Countries take different approaches in legislating on this matter. There may be relevant provisions in patent, copyright laws, employment laws, laws on employees' reinvention, and or laws dealing with university IP and technology transfer. Now, while there are important differences among national laws and also among the IP policies of different universities, PRIs, in many countries, IP rights vest in the creator inventor, except where IP was created, invented by an employee in the course of his or her employment and was result of a task that he or she was assigned. So these are the things you have to keep in mind. To what level one can own it. Where there is an express contractual agreement, parties may agree as to who owns the IP subject to applicable national law. Where IP emanates from research funded by the government. Then the IP will be the government property. The national laws of some countries establish special rules on ownership of publicly funded IP, and the balance between the private interest and the broader public interest must be reached. So, what are the possible IP ownership schemes? Possible IP ownership schemes for inventions resulting from publicly funded research. Countries have adopted different approaches to whether the employees, researcher, professor, etc., the employer, university PRI, the state or the sponsoring agency will be considered the owner of innovations, inventions, and other research results developed within the universities or PRIs using public funds. There are two typical approaches. Professors' privilege. University professors and researchers have full rights to the IP they create. So this university professors and researchers have the full rights to IP they created. This allows them, and not the institution who professor. This allows them, and not the institution, to decide whether or not to patent and how to further develop their discovery, even if the underlying research was supported by public funds. Right? This is a professor's privilege. Usually, the university has some form of license to use the IP. In some cases, if the institution provides substantial support to the inventor for technology transfer, the benefits will be shared with the institution. Examples of professor privilege include Italy and Spain. So these are the countries they have professors privilege in Italy and Sweden. Right? Institutional ownership. The IP rights or results of publicly funded research are owned by the institution where the researcher works and not by the researcher. So, the institution usually given responsibility for the protection and further development of the invention. Right. Now, in recent years, so there will be development or understanding and the amendment. In recent years, there have been a clear trend towards institutional ownership. So, this is a trend now. Institutional ownership is a recent trend. Now, countries that currently apply this principle include Brazil, China, Denmark, Germany, Japan, Kenya, Norway, Singapore, Spain, Thailand, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America, among others. Right? Now, there are two primary systems of institutional ownership. Institutional ownership has preemption rights. The first owner is the employee research, but the institution is entitled to claim the invention, most usually within a specified period of time. Preemption rights. What is that? The first owner is the employee or the researcher, but the institution is entitled to claim the invention, most usually within a specified period. This is the system, for example, in Austria and the Czech Republic. So again, this every country has their own law. In most of this preemption rights system, the institution must pay some form of remuneration. It can be either before or after to the employee inventor as compensation for transferring the rights to the patent, the invention to the institute. For example, Hungary, Lithuania. Automatic ownership. The institution is automatically the first owner of the IP rights. This approach is usually subject to certain conditions and rights of inventors. For example, the right to remuneration and moral rights to the invention. For example, Denmark, Finland, Germany, and the United States of America. Regardless of legislation in which the issue is included, there are good reasons to have a nationwide policy that clarifies issues of ownership of IP rights in publicly funded research. This provides clear and predictable rules of the game for all the stakeholders and also facilitate joint research between the different institutions. Some countries, for example, Poland and South Africa, have legislation in place that make it obligatory for publicly funded research institutions to have an IP policy. So that is a mandate. Now the thing is, can universities PRS alter the national rule of ownership of IP rights because they work in under the jurisdiction of particular country, particular university? There will be circumstances in which national laws impose limitations on how universities and PRS can deal with IP rights. Subject to the limitations, each institution may regulate the principles of ownership of IP rights through its internal policy, employment contracts, and other contractual arrangements. In many cases, the issue will be the appropriate distribution of rights among the creator inventor, other participants in application, and the university or PRI. No single model IP policy exists for this. Each university PRI has the autonomy to develop its own approach, generally seeking to take into account the interests of all the stakeholders. So, all are involved in this. Who typically owns IP generated by the university? PRI employee. Typically, who owns IP generated by the university? Rules on IP ownership will depend on the national law and individual institutions' policies, among other things. But it is common for the university to apply different rules for IP in research result and IP in teaching material. So, there will be two aspects in the research, in the institute, in the universities or PRI. Research results, IP of research results, IP of teaching materials or methods. Ownership of IP in research results generated by the employee. Now we will be dealing with the research results. Many universities claim ownership of any IP that is generated by academic staff in the course of their employment. And also when IP is created using substantial institution resources. This invariably happens. Nevertheless, in such case, university PRS may grant a variety of rights to their employees, most commonly as employees keep the copyright in certain categories of creative work they created. Employees receive a share of net benefits arising from commercialization of the IP. Any IP that the institution decides not to commercialize is assigned to the employees. Employees have the right to be consulted about whether and how to commercialize the IP. Employees receive a license to use the IP for their own teaching and research purposes. Employees have the right to publish research. Employees have the right to be acknowledged as the creator, inventor. Disputes of such often arise when an employee does some work at home or office hours or produces work outside the scope of his or her ordinary employment, that is an institution or university. It is good practice to have employees sign a written agreement. Always have a written agreement in some form or other that clearly addresses the duties of the employees and issue of ownership of rights in such case. So one should have a written agreement clearly. IP in teaching materials. So far I have dealt with research results and teaching materials generated by the employee. Every member of the university committee has a right and responsibility with respect to copyright and other IP teaching materials. Teaching materials. Here we are concerned with the teaching material. The teaching material comes under copyright. Countries have adopted different approaches to regulate IP ownership such way. One approach among the vast array of approaches, for example, is to grant employees copyright in the teaching materials teaching create even within the scope of an employment relationship. In such case, the employee is generally required to grant the institution a royalty fee, non-exclusive license to use the material for teaching purposes. So they will not expect anything from the institution. The employee remains, however, sole owner of the copyright and has the freedom to further license his work to the third party. So it is an understanding. Another model is to take the opposite road by making the institution the sole owner of the copyright. Here the institution will be the sole owner of the copyright in teaching materials created by its employees in the scope of their duties. So again, one can have a clear written agreement. The employee is then usually granted a royalty-free, non-exclusive license for personal use of the work, including the teaching purposes, even after the end of his or employment in the institution, provided that such use will be of a non-commercial character. Right? In this case, the right to exploit and license the work belongs to the institution, but the creator may be given a share in the commercialization revenue generated by successful exploitation of IP. Therefore, universities can facilitate the dissemination of the copyrighted material by developing an adequate policy. So all these things come under the national law. Okay. Now, special rules are regularly established with respect to, among others, teaching materials specifically commissioned by the institution, works created by the employees in the performance of administrative duties, collective works, the authorship of which cannot be attributed to one or a discrete number of authors, but is rather a result from simultaneous or sequential contribution over time by multiple academics or students, databases, software, programs, course method on videos or other digital forms. Moral rights, exceptions and limitations. For example, for library lending, use of work for educational and research purposes, etc. So these are the exceptions. Who owns IP? Generated by students. Most universities recognize as a general principle that students who are not employees of the university own the IP rights in the work they produce purely based on the knowledge received from the lectures and teaching. Here, this is the issue. There may be some circumstances where ownership has to be shared or assigned to the university or a third party. Typically, these include students who are sponsored, students who are sponsored. Any conditions made by the sponsor regarding ownership of IP developed during the period of sponsorship, particularly granting ownership of the sponsor, must be respected. So, if anybody is sponsoring a student for any purpose, they have the right part in the IP. Students should be forewarned of the terms of the sponsorship agreement at the outset of the project. So naturally, students should be made clear. Students working on sponsored research project, ownership of IP from the project will usually be covered by the research contract between the sponsor and the university. So there will be a contract in place. Students should be informed of these terms before starting work on the project. Actually, there should be understanding and awareness. Students working on research, thesis or publication in collaboration with academic staff. Where students undertake research in a team with academic staff, that is collaborative work, this will often be connected in some ways to academic, ongoing research and may be part of a much larger research program. In such cases, students may be required to assign IP rights produced during the project to the university. So, use of university resources. Now, where the university resources are used, then the student's role. Where a student makes substantial use of the university facilities, equipment, IP and other resources, the IP generated is often owned by the university. While the student will usually be entitled to benefit sharing from successful commercialization. So because the student is using all the facilities, infrastructure, equipment and other resources. While it is important to address these issues in the university IP policy, the university would usually need to have an express agreement from the student before he or she embarks on the research. This is because students are not automatically bound by the policies of the university. Because students are not automatically bounded. Who are the persons bounded by these policies? Are employees and are others indirectly involved, are other research, outside research. Supervisors must also ensure that students are aware of the consequences if IP associated with a project is disclosed prematurely. Who wants IP generated by visiting researchers? This is different aspect. Visiting researchers may bring existing IP to use at the host institution and may also create IP during the time at the host institution. Because a person, a visiting researcher, may sometimes have IP with him. So he may use it, or he may extend that use of that IP here, or he may create by using that in the host institution. The position of the visiting researcher depends on whether the host institution has a specific agreement with the funding agency or sponsor. Such agreements is usually set out the circumstance under which the host institution may seek ownership of IP. However, the host institution will also usually still need to have a written agreement from the visiting researcher to be bound by those terms. Because always good to have a written agreement. The situation may be more complex where the visiting researcher is either self-funded or funded by the agency or sponsor with which the host institution has no agreement. So visiting researcher may bring funds with him where the university has no agreement or no control over it. In either case, IP issues must be clarified with the visiting researcher in writing before the research starts. So they should sit out and sort it out. Who owns IP in collaborative funded works? The terms of collaborative agreement or the funding agreement will specify who will own the IP created and who may benefit from access to the IP, example by way of a license. As in the case of South Africa, where industry pays full cost or for the R&D, the industry owns the IP. Some universities, PRS include provisions in their IP policies to address the collaborative or sponsored research. Contractual provisions causing collaboration should be clear about the ownership of rights in the background of IP, the ownership rights in the foreground IP, as I said earlier, the rights to use the IP where one party does not own it or where it jointly owned. What is the best approach to deal with the ownership issue? Decisions on ownership of IP and distribution of IP will depend on the mission of the university, the legal and political framework, the areas of research concern, the constraints on funding, the type of material in which IP rights exist, and the purpose for which they have been created. Decisions may also be affected by the social, cultural environment surrounding the university. Here, consequently, there is no good or best approach that is suitable for. There is no good or best approach that is suitable for all. The most important guideline for university PRS to ensure that any decision on ownership of IP use the best potential for all stakeholders to have access to the IP, achieves a fair balance of rights, establish a clear rule for IP ownership to maximum legal certainty. Universities and PRS need to remember that it is one thing to adopt an institutional IP policy that regulates ownership of IP and provides a rule on fair distribution of it. It is entirely another to obtain and exploit IP rights for successful dissemination and transfer of technology. So objectives can only be achieved if employees and other creators, inventors are aware of the way in which the ownership is regulated, are willing to cooperate in protecting IP derived from their creation, invention, plus that the university PRA is competent to manage the IP in a professional manner. Why should copyright be taken into account? The universities and PRAs are large producers and users of copyright material. Universities and PRAs are large producers and users of copyright material. Institution policy should therefore clarify ownership of copyright material created by the staff and students, use of third-party materials, dealing with copyright infringement, licensing and assigning rights, application of limitations and exceptions as I discussed earlier, user-generated content in e-learning, open access policies and strategies, copyright in peer-reviewed material, IP issues in websites, and open educational resources. Why are incentives important for the researcher? Naturally, so researchers should be given some incentive. Government can encourage university and PRS to develop research. To ensure researchers become inventors, the research must have incentives too. Both institution and individual researchers should be incentivized to disclose, protect, exploit their invention. Incentives can include sticks such as legal or administrative requirement for researchers to disclose invention to the university or PRA that employ them, but also carrots such as royalty sharing agreement for equity participation in academic scholarship. Recognition of patent activity in the evaluation and recruitment of faculty can also provide incentive for young researchers. Can there be a balance between openness and commercialization of research? Openness and commercialization may seem like diametrically opposed concepts, but in fact they coexist naturally in today's knowledge economy. With the development of the internet, the open science movement has emerged. So often, open access publication will be an appropriate way of disseminating scholarship. But in commercialization continues to play an invaluable role too. Many research results require substantial further work and investment to generate useful investment. The temporary monopoly granted by IP protection encourages industry, example the pharmaceutical industry, to partner with the researchers and market their inventions by ensuring that businesses have a chance to recoup their investment. Through being developed and marketed, these inventions become actual products that can be used by the public and so improve the society. So, patent documents for inventions are published 18 months after the first patent application filed. This means that it is possible to file patent protection while also publishing research results in peer-reviewed publication. In other words, patenting and publication can coexist, having reserved IP rights. By filing a patent application, a researcher may still publish the research results. What is the relationship between national IP policies, national IP strategy, and national institutional IP policy? National IP policy express the intent of a country to use the IP system. National IP strategies are measures taken by a economy. Right? Many IP-related policy and strategies promote research and innovation. An institutional IP policy must comply with all relevant national policies and strategies because they work under the jurisdiction or their specific issues for genetic resources and traditional knowledge. So we are more concerned. The collection and use of subsequent transfer of biological material, including genetic resources, and that is GR, and associated traditional knowledge is often a critical part of the university activity in many disciplines. In both developing and developed countries, there is a growing attention to biocultural sensitivity, food security related issues, and various requirements. Universities can play a crucial role as intermediaries in the transfer of information, knowledge, and intermediate research products, including biological materials, to private sectors and other research partners. That being so, there is a great need to raise awareness of and promote respect for applicable legal requirements, including customary laws. This need is accentuated when R&D occurs in the context of transnational research projects. It is therefore important to consult national IP laws in respect of disclosure of TK or GR, benefit sharing arrangements and consent from TK GR owners. Universities should undertake sound due diligence in relation to the initial collection, use and possible transfer of GR and associated TK. This should enable and support or at least not preempt the possibility of providing defensive as well as positive protection of GR and associated TK in accordance with the applicable national legislation of the provider country. So due diligence will also help the university ensure further future investment in the development of their IP. Countries are negotiating possible new legal instruments on the interface between IP, GR and traditional knowledge. These negotiations being conducted within the WIPO Intergovernmental Committee on Intellectual Property and Genetic Resources, Traditional Knowledge and Folklore (IGC) might also eventually have a bearing on how universities collect, use, conduct research on, and manage IP risk, right in relation to the TK and GR. So this is an evaluatory process. How does an institution IP policy relate to its other policies? And IP policy is usually part of broader regulatory framework of an institution. As such, it must be coherent and compliant with the other acts or policies put in place, especially those related close to scope of the IP policy. So this is the case not only for policy regulating a precise type of IP, copyright, trademark, utility model, the participation of the student, collaboration with the industry, confidentiality, functioning of the institution, PMO, creation of institution. Very often the games also are cross-reference. How can WIPO assist? So how WIPO can assist? WIPO is a specialized agency of United Nations dealing with IP issues. WIPO provides free access to unique knowledge banks of IP information. Through websites and publications, one can learn about IP law and policy generally, as well as accessing material specifically aimed at universities and IPR. So, as a member of the WIPO, World Intellectual Property, India, and our national laws and our university policies should be based on these WIPO's guidelines. What other services does WIPO provide to universities and IPR? The IP policy is usually part of broader regulatory framework of an institution. Broader regulatory framework of an institution. It must be coherent and compliant with other acts of or policy, but it put in place, especially those related closely to its scope. This is the case notably for the policy regulating technology innovation support, provide technology information service and related service, including access to online patent databases. TISCs thus help in inventor, researcher, and entrepreneur to exploit the innovative potential. WIPO supports its member states in establishing and developing TISCs in universities and other institutions in numerous countries around the world. The Investor Assistance Program, a joint initiative of WIPO and the World Economic Forum, puts eligible investors and small businesses in touch with an expert in the country who is willing to give them free legal advice on how to file a patent to protect their invention. The WIPO Academy, there is a WIPO Academy, which provides face-to-face training and distance learning courses on intellectual property in partnership with over 50 institutions worldwide, including university IP offices. Apart from university students and teachers of IP, WIPO Academy rich portfolio of general and specialized courses cater to other diverse audiences, inventors and creators, business managers, IP professionals, policy makers, and government officials of IP institute deployed and civil society in general. WIPO Economic and Statistics Division has initiated research project, international comparison of knowledge transfer policies and practices. This is very important. International comparison of knowledge transfer policies and practices. The project has three objectives: to develop a conceptual framework for evaluating knowledge transfer activities and outcomes, drawing on World Intellectual Property Report 2011 to identify suitable survey methods and metrics for assessing knowledge transfer and activities and outcomes. And the third one is to assess the relationship between the knowledge transfer and downstream economic outcomes for the following pilot countries: China, Brazil, South Africa, the UK, and the Republic of Korea, Germany. The project seeks, this is a project that seeks to provide guidance on how to evaluate and support effective knowledge transfer and policies and practices. Ideally, the survey and evaluation framework will be deployed to other countries to yield comparable data over time. So this is outline or guidelines for universities and IP, that is intellectual property rights. Thank you. So I will be ending my lecture here. Have a nice day.